All of a sudden, Election Day, November 5th, is less than 2 weeks away. Of course, many Vermonters have already voted, about 80,000 or so, according to the election officials at the Vermont Secretary of State's office. And while Vermont has historically had elections free from accusations of voting fraud or plagued with misinformation campaigns, we thought it would be interesting to learn just how our votes in Vermont are tallied and what happens with our ballots when they go into the tabulator or are mailed in. So we met up online with Sean Sheehan, Vermont's Director of Elections and Campaign Finance at the Secretary of State's office, to learn more.
Maybe two broad paths that happen in Vermont, as you say, with the tabulator machines is the one path, but also very small towns in Vermont aren't required to have the tabulator machine. So there are still some towns that hand count their ballots, and that's a second path we can certainly talk about. But in the case of working with the towns that have tabulators, which is medium sized, large towns, and some small as well, is their local government, their board of civil authority, can decide whether to process ballots early, and if they do, they're allowed by state law to process ballots into the machines up to 30 days in advance of the election. So they would be able to have, well, I guess already been doing it for a couple of weeks now, right? With 15 election being 15 days from today. So if that's the case, the thing that clerks do in both hand count towns and in towns that have tabulators is when the mail comes in, or if a ballot is dropped in their drop box, they open that outer envelope to make sure that the ballot on the inside is inside another envelope, where the voter would sign, attest that it is their vote, that they cast it on their own free will, not influenced by others. And they would look at that, make sure it's signed, and then put it in the vault in the secure location. That would happen in both the hand count towns and the tabulator towns. If, on the other hand, they looked and that envelope wasn't signed, that would be considered a defective ballot. And if there's a defective ballot, the clerk would do a couple things. One, they would mark in the election management system that the ballot was received, but it was defective. What that would do is mean if you go to your webpage, and any Vermonter can go to the web, go to mvp.vermont.gov. My voter page is mvp.vermont.gov. That's the same place people can go to find their local polling location, to see the status of their ballot, to find a voter guide, to find out what is it that high bailiffs do anyway, and read up on the candidates that are running for those positions and what those positions do. But they can also see if their ballot was mailed to them when it was issued, and if they mail the ballot back or drop it back to their clerk, they'll see that it says ballot status received, and it might say received accepted, or it might say received defective. And if it's defective, they're going to want to call their clerk or go down to their clerk's office. Even if they don't check MVP, it's okay. The clerks they are required within 3 days to send a letter to the voter, letting them know that the ballot was defective, and they should come down to the clerk's office to cure the ballot. The case, the example we're talking about, could just mean signing the back of it. And so then once it's accepted, somebody can see on the MVP page the ballot's been accepted. They can rest assured that their ballot's going to be counted. As far as when it's counted, again, that's where it comes down to whether the BCA has voted to process ballots early if they have a tabulator. If they voted to process it early, there always has to be 2 election officials involved, and one is going to open up that signed envelope and take out the ballot, pass it and face down to the next election official. That ensures that the vote is anonymous. That protects the privacy of your vote. The first election official is seeing that you signed it. They're seeing your name. They're not looking at the ballot. They're passing it to the next election official. That first official then checks your name off of the voter checklist to show that you did vote in that election. So if you forget and show up on election day, go to check in, they'll say, we see you're already signed off, and you will say, oh, that's right, I voted. I forgot I mailed that in, and that'll prevent you from from breaking the law and voting voting twice there. That second election official then would take the ballot that was voted. They're going to put it into the tabulator machine, and the machine is going to read, accept the ballot, but it's not going to count any results or display any results until election night. So really what this process does is it just allows election officials in Vermont towns to get a jump start on the work that can be done ahead of time rather than on election night. But if a town is a hand count town, or if the BCA hasn't voted to process ballots early, then those ballots are going to stay inside that envelope. They're still going to be opened from the outside envelope. The election official will still make sure it was signed, still contact the voter if it was defective, if it wasn't signed, but it's going to stay inside that sealed signed envelope in the vault, protected until election night. Then when the election officials are counting all of the votes that were cast on election day, they're going to count those absentee, those mailed, dropped off ballots at the same time.
So it sounds like there's quite a lot of security already built into that whole process. Um, how, how long does it usually take to sort of finalize and confirm that the numbers that have been reported are accurate, or there's no reason to think that there was some confusion of any sort at any stage in the process? Is it that's usually a couple of days later, is it, or?
Yeah, there's two stages of reporting votes. We have what we call election night reporting, or ENR, which are unofficial results, and those all are done election night, usually before midnight, but however long it takes to get through the ballots there. The second stage is the official the official vote results, the ORV, the official return of votes, and that the clerks have 48 hours from the end of polls closing, so they have until 7 p.m. on the Thursday after election day to finalize those results. But in practical terms, nearly all of the clerks complete them. The vast majority of them complete them on the Wednesday, the day after the election. And the difference really comes down, there's no difference in the number of votes that are cast, but it gives them a chance to just check with non-blurry eyes, right? If they've been working since 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, whenever the polls open, till late at night counting, to see if there was any issues there. And the bigger thing is really on the write-in votes. So really, we see very little difference in the numbers of on the ballot candidates, the results that they got of people, filling in the dots, whether it was done by a tabulator or done by a hand count. That's pretty straightforward. In the election night reporting versus the ORV doesn't have significant differences, virtually any differences from one to the other. Where you do see differences are on the write-ins. And so if you have if somebody wrote in Andrew McKeever, and you had 10 write-in votes for Andrew McKeever, but then somebody wrote in, Andreas McKeever, right? Is that the same person that they were trying to write in? What if they wrote in Andrea McKeever? And so those decisions are all made at the local level. There's guidance and statute, but it comes down to the members of the BCA looking at those write-in votes, saying, what did this person mean, the same person, when they had different variations of the write-in names. And that's where you have some merger. Then in the election night reporting, all those write-ins might not all be specified out and lumped together, but when they get to the ORV, they will go through that cleanup. And so, yeah, that part is 48 hours. As far as where it comes to us, the input into the system on election night, that's where people and media outlets, get the unofficial results. They can see our election night reporting as they come in town by town across the 247 cities and towns in Vermont, really across the 283 representative districts, as they're reported by representative district. And Burlington has a bunch of representative districts within the city of Burlington. A bunch of other towns might be split among having a couple different state reps for their town. So there's 283 together, and as those 283 come in, they're then aggregated, and you see who won the various races unofficially by election night totals, and then a couple days later with the official return of voting. And then the canvass is when the votes are certified, when the elections are certified for the statewide and local offices. That happens the Tuesday after election day. So at 10 a.m. on November 12th is when we'll have a statewide canvass here in Montpelier, where we look at certifying all the statewide races: who won governor, who won lieutenant governor, who won attorney general, treasurer, down way. And then at the same time, the county clerks are doing the state senate and the county office, which this year is the high bailiff. They'll be certifying those results. And then the representative clerks at that same time, 10 a.m. on the 12th, are certifying who won the state legislative races.
I noticed that Secretary of State Copeland Hanses has put out a notice about concerns about deep fakes, something about that recently, or election scams of one sort. I wonder if you could describe what concern that was addressing, or did you have some reason to think that there are some deep fakes or some disinformation tools already in play out there that voters need to be aware of?
Yes, yeah, we have heard. We haven't heard specific threats directly specific to Vermont, but certainly AI deepfakes are out there, and what we're hearing from the intelligence community, law enforcement community, is that deepfakes are to be expected for this general election, and they've already happened this year in American elections, with the over in New Hampshire with their presidential primary. There was a robocalls that appeared to have used AI to replicate President Biden's voice on a set of robocalls there. And the step that was taken in New Hampshire to react to that, their Secretary of State and Attorney General coming together, communicating swiftly and clearly on that, really became seen as a best practice and a good way to head that off. And so you see all of the Secretary of States together on with campaigns to really try to serve as this trusted information campaigns, to make it clear the Secretary of State's offices, and locally with town clerks, to be sources of trusted information. So here you saw Secretary of State Copeland Hanses work together with Attorney General Charity Clark. They put together the information we have up on sos.vermont.gov about AI deepfakes and scams, talking about some of those efforts. It's not just been in the U.S. They also had elections in India earlier this year. There were a lot of AI deepfakes, robocalls happened there as well. So I think it's part of the new the new landscape. And when something like that can be generated so fast, hit so fast, I think it's really something that people should expect or anticipate. We don't know what it'll look like, but it's part of that whole expect the unexpected as we get closer to election day.
For the local view, we spoke with Kim Seymour, the town clerk of Weston, to learn what they do at the local level.
Up until 2020, we were a hand count town, which is arduous, to say it kindly. We, until 2020, probably weren't over 500 registered voters. And for probably centuries, the town was a hand count town. In 2020, we had an August primary, and it was during COVID. And I was only able to get 4 volunteers to help us hand count. It was a huge turnout, and it was really, really hard. So I approached the Board of Civil Authority and I asked them to allow us to get a tabulator, and they agreed. And part of my reason for doing that was the population we have here in Weston is aging. That's sort of a given almost in Vermont, but everybody at that time was really concerned about getting COVID and how to stay away from it. So the people most at risk were my primary helpers. And getting hand counters who would hand count a batch of 20 or 50 at a time on an election that we knew would have a big turnout was not practical that year. It was quite a concern. So I asked the Board of Civil Authority to allow us to get a tabulator. The state provided it. We used it that first time in 2020, and it went so well, I called the then clerk in Londonderry, Kelly Pajala, and said, where are the instructions for this? Because this went so easily. I'm not really sure I did it right. And it was just such a relief. I know that it was a big transition for us, but people just put their ballots in and were a little shy of it. But as we've gone through the last few elections with it, it has been a blessing to have the tabulator. Typically, towns with fewer than 1,000 voters, I believe it is, are not required to have it. But it is so accurate and it is so easy. And I feel so confident using it that I feel like more towns under that threshold should actually be using it. It's just a huge saver. So we will count them by the tabulator, and we are receiving early voting and absentee voting voted ballots already. And we just hold those. We account for them in the election system and note that they're back. And then on the day of election, we will open them with the workers that day and go through a whole process of getting them put into the tabulator.
So voters come in on election day, they cast their ballots, they go into the machine, and then at 7 o'clock or whenever voting is over, I guess you don't have to go through the actual paper ballots anymore, right? You just take the numbers off the machine, and then what are they emailed up to Montpelier to the Secretary of State, or how does that
So
transmit?
that's a 2-part question. We actually do have to put eyes on ballots, the paper ballots. And so we actually organize them so that we can have a count. And I think this goes back to our hand counting days where we wanted to balance the number of paper ballots to what we have on the tabulator. And we also have to account for the write-in votes or things that have gone into a different bin in the tabulator box because something wasn't legible, something wasn't voted, was undervoted or overvoted. And so we have to put eyes on the physical ballots. And then we summarize the tape from the tabulator, and it is then input into the elections management system for election night results. We are required to have those in as soon as possible, and as soon as we can do it accurately. And then the next day we can review things again, the tape, and do our official results information in the management system.
Voting in Vermont is safe and reliable, and election officials work hard to ensure its accuracy. Now it's up to you to do your part and get out and vote. Vermont makes it easier than almost any other state for its citizens to exercise their voting franchise. You can even register to vote on the spot on Election Day at your town hall. Another important resource all voters should be aware of is your My Voter page on the Secretary of State's website, located at mvp.vermont.gov. There, you can check out your voter registration status, absentee ballot status, mail-in application and ballot status, poll location, elected officials, registration information on file with the town office, and get a sample ballot for the upcoming election. So as someone once said, if you don't vote, don't complain later. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.